All right, here we have File Explorer showing the C drive, and in particular, this sales and marketing folder that you see right here. The problem is, this is on a local computer, and I have to have people in sales and I have to have people in marketing both access this folder. I can't just have them all walk up in a single file line and each one of them log on to this computer anytime somebody needs to access something that's inside of this, right? So that doesn't really work out. So what we want to have happen instead is for them to be able to access this folder over the network. That's what we have sharing for, okay? So what we're going to be able to do here, if we're going to make the most fundamental kind of a share with this, is we're simply going to set up sharing. And now the problem here also is my computer might not be enabled for sharing. Okay, you have to check that out first. So I'm going to go down here into the Network and Sharing Center, and you can also access this from Control Panel. Then we go over here to Advanced Sharing Settings, and you'll see whether or not network discovery is on or off. So, for example, in a private network, we have turned on network discovery, and this is going to turn on automatic setup of network connected devices. The basic idea here is simply that we'll be able to see shares that are out there on the network. We'll be able to browse through the network and see them, or we can UNC path to those network shares. And likewise, if I have something to share, other people can see that on my computer as well. That sounds a little bit security sensitive, and it is, but notice that we're on a private network here. This means that if we're on something like, a 10. Network or a 192.168 network or something like that, that those IP addresses are recognized as private and not public. It's not like I'm on the public Wi-Fi at the airport or at Starbucks or someplace like that. So in those private types of networks, we have network discovery turned on. That's usually fine. And then similarly down here, we have file and printer sharing. When we have this turned on, that means that I can actually go and share a specific folder or a specific printer. Okay, so those resources are available on my computer to others in this private type of network. And the rest of these are the same. So if I go to domain, which is my current profile, and the way it recognizes that I'm on a domain network is not simply the fact that I have a private IP addressing, because, I do have private IP addressing in this network. It's a 10. Network. But it's also because this computer is joined to a domain, and I logged onto this computer and started it up in the domain. So the computer was authenticated by the domain controller, and the user was authenticated by the domain controller. So Windows can tell that we're in the domain environment here. Now in this case, notice that file and printer sharing is actually turned off in the domain profile. This means that sharing anything is a non-starter until I at least click Turn On File and Printer Sharing. Now if you don't do that, it will prompt you there anyway, so I'll just leave that the way it is right now with it turned off, and you'll see here in a moment that if I go in here to Sales and Marketing, and I decide that I want to share that, I can say share it with specific people. You've probably seen me share resources at other places throughout this nugget, but we haven't addressed it specifically the way I'm doing here, so we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to share this to sales. So we'll say the sales department. It'll automatically resolve that it's in Active Directory. It'll give them read access. Now when I click on share, it's going to go ahead and give it the share access here, and you can email this to somebody, or you can copy the link to the program, and what it's going to do, and paste the link into another program, what it's going to do is it's going to take this UNC path and make that available. So if I wanted to map a drive to it or something like that, I would map a drive to that UNC path, or I could browse through the network for it. You can also see all shares on this computer. I don't really think we have anything else. I guess we have this users. I must have created that at some point in the past. But that's it. So we click on Done, and then when we go back over to this item right here, this Advanced Sharing Settings, I'm going to cancel out of that and come back into it. And we'll see here now that we go down to the domain profile and file and printer sharing that it's now turned on. If you're logged on as an unprivileged user, then you'll get a prompt here to, when you try to share something, to enter in administrative credentials, which will then in the background turn this on for you. I was already logged on as an administrator, so it didn't have to prompt me. Now the computer we were just looking at previously was Win10.01, but here I've logged on to Win10.02 as a normal user who's a member, in this case, of the sales group. I have an Active Directory group called Sales. Phoenix User 01 is a member of that group. But notice that as I click on File Explorer, I don't really see anything here that gives me access to that share that was created over on Win10.01, which is the other computer. I can browse for it through network, but I don't really have discovery turned on. Again, here with this, I can click the option here to turn on network and discovery sharing. Again, you have to have an administrator approval to do this, so I'll enter in my credentials. You can also enable this through a group policy object, but once that's been done, now I see Win10.0.1. Now, obviously, as a user, somebody will have had to email me or send me a link or something like I was showing you earlier in the share when it was completed, where it could give you the UNC path. Or they would tell me, hey, just double-click on Win10.0.1. There's a share in there. Oh, sure enough, it's sales and marketing. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, so I right-click here, and then I can go to this and choose Map Network Drive, and then it will prompt me for a drive letter. Usually, it starts at the bottom of the alphabet and works its way up. So that's just fine. You can also connect using different credentials if you want to, but we don't really need to in our case. And then I just click on Finish. You may have also seen that it said there to reconnect a login. That means that it's persistent, and it will always appear from this point forward unless I disconnect it. As a quick tangent, if you want to know how to turn on that network discovery using a group policy object so that you don't have to visit each individual computer, you can go to Link Layer Topology Discovery here under Administrative Templates and Network. From here, you go to Turn on Mapper, and that allows us to view other resources on the network and browse it that way. And then we can enable this and decide whether we want to allow it in the domain or any of these other networks. Okay? And then alternatively, we can also decide whether we want this computer, whichever computer it is, to respond to network probes. And that would be this item right here, where you again enable it and choose which network profile you want to enable it within. Now remember also that when I shared this, I shared it with read-only permission for the sales group. And because of that, it actually changes the underlying NTFS permissions. So if I look at the properties of one of these files, for example, we'll see here on security, we have the sales group, right? But they have read and execute and read-only. So it's pretty much read-only permissions that have been granted. If we go and take a look at one of these, for example, and if I try to make a change to it, I don't know, 3, and then, step over dead bodies. I don't know why I say that. That's morbid. Do whatever it takes, people. Then I try to save this. It gives me the Save As dialog. I try to save it. It says I can't, access denied. So I have no ability to make any changes to this. Another thing we can do is to make something kind of super available and not really be concerned about anybody's permissions. Even a stranger on my network could be able to access certain kinds of documents. That's not always bad if they're not security sensitive. It might be company brochures that we want people to access. It might be maybe we have everybody in the company that we want to access this particular JPEG. Maybe we're going to use this in all of our brochures and everything like that. We just want it to be accessible. This is a photograph I took in Crescent City, California last summer. So anyway, we take this and we can copy that, or cut it. It doesn't really matter. It just depends on your purposes for it. And then we can go into this PC to the local disk, and I'm going to Users, and then there's a public folder. There's this public pictures, and now I can just paste this in here. Okay, so now that should be accessible no matter where I am on the network. So let's go over to another computer. And here I'm just logged on as a unprivileged user. I'm Phoenix User 02. And with Phoenix User 02's privileges, which again are really none, then I can just go over here to Network, and I can browse through and find that public share over on Win10.02. And there's Users, and there's Public, and then here's all the public folders. All right, there's public pictures, and then of course there's the graphic that we just looked at. Some reason it wants to open it in Paint here. Thank you very little. But anyway, there it is. Now, I showed you one way to share, and that is to right-click directly on the folder. Another way you can share is to still right-click on the folder. So let me go to another folder here. Let me create another one. And I'll just call this folder HR. Maybe I have a Human Resources department. I can still right-click on it, but notice that the first way I shared was to go Share With, and then Specific People. And from here, of course, we could change things to Read, Write, or Read, or Remove, so that they don't have any share permissions anymore. But canceling that, I can also go down here to Properties, and then Sharing. And with that, if I click on Share here, it just launches the same wizard. Okay, pretty much. Takes me to the same place. However, if I choose Advanced Sharing, from within this I can share the folder and give it a different share name. For example, some folder names are kind of obscure and most people might not understand what they actually mean, but here you can simplify it, or actually you could even be more descriptive. So I might say HR or type out Human Resources instead of leaving it just HR. You can limit the number of users that can connect. By default, it's 20 in Windows 10. On servers, it's unlimited unless you specify a limit. And then in the permissions here, we could say everyone read permission or change permission, which gives them the ability to modify anything that's already in there or delete anything or add to the folder. if they want to, or add more subfolders, pretty much anything you would want to do. Or you can also go to full control, which means they also have the ability to change permissions. But in our case, I'm just going to leave it at change permission, for example. And then we would just click on caching here as well. Almost forgot that one. Caching determines what you want to do with offline files. Okay, so you could say that only files and programs that users specify are available offline. In other words, if you remember from our offline files nugget, that they can right-click on a folder or a file and just decide to make that available offline, meaning that even if they're disconnected, there's a cached copy of that file or folder that's copied to their computer and synchronized with the network version, or none of them are available, or all of them are always available. So those are your options for that. So that's one way, again, of sharing. I'm going to cancel all of this because I'm not going to completely go through with that in this case. Let's do it a different way. This is yet another way to share things, and I just think you should know about the various methods. You could go to Computer Management as an administrator, and you'll see here that I am logged on as the trainer account, who is a local administrator of this computer. And in shared folders here, we can go to the shares, and we can stop sharing something if we want to. We can make modifications to it if we want. And again, we can also choose a new share here, which launches a different wizard, but it does all the same stuff. So I can browse again here now, for example, to where is my C drive? This is PC, and then C drive, and then HR, okay, and then next. And these are all the same options, okay? One thing I don't think is in this, though, is limiting the number of users that can make a connection. I remember it was 20 in the previous method I showed you. Here I don't think we have that, but here's where we can change offline file capabilities. And that's pretty much it. Then we can also do this, though. We get the ability to customize the permissions here. And again, go to custom. And this is similar to what I showed you earlier. In fact, it's the same actual dialog box. But I'll just say how all users have read access for the time being. And then when you click finish, you can launch the wizard again for additional shares, or just click finish. Now, we've taken a look at a few different ways to share. Here's another way, and that's using a command line using netshare. This is a command that we've had available for many years across, gosh, lots of different versions of Windows. And what you do is you type in netshare here, and then the name of the share, HR, or I could have typed out human resources. If there's a space in it, then you'll need to enclose it with quotation marks. And then this equals this physical path, and then you can see it was shared successfully. Very simple. You can also add additional permissions and things like that. If you want to know more, go netshare // and that will give you the full syntax. This is interesting. Netshare will show you all of the shares that are on this computer. Notice this, though, the $. The significance of that is on any destination computer where I am an administrator, that means that I have an administrative share over there. So even on my domain controller, you see, right now I'm logged on as a trainer account, the trainer account in the domain. And as such, I'm an administrator on the domain controller. So I could go DC Nugget 01, and you can see here $, and that just allows me to browse the full drive over there without having to explicitly create a share for me to access. So very handy for network troubleshooting and getting around the organization and browsing for files on any computer, as long as you're an administrator over there. And then here, what we can do is to delete a share. So I could type netshare, and then it's the HR share that we had. We saw it right here, listed under netshare. And then you specify the name of the computer using whack, and then the name of the computer here, and then / delete. And now I've deleted that share. Finally, be aware of the fact that there are also PowerShell commandlets, such as new SMB share, where I can specify the name as human resources in this case, just for something different. And then I specify the path, and you can see I think it pretty well explains itself, and there it is. There's also a number of other PowerShell commandlets with SMB share commandlets, and you can see that in this tiny URL that I've made available for you up here at the top. Okay, so just be aware of the fact that that is there. And you don't need to memorize all these. There's quite a few of these. So you don't need to memorize these and all their syntax. That would just make your head explode. But at least be aware of the fact that they're available. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.